So, what I'd like to do now is walk you through a few ways to really get in touch with values. Because once we have an ABC and people have put the pattern together, they see what the long-term consequences are of their behavior, you might get a little bit of traction for behavior change just with that self-awareness. And if people know what their frequently used dots are, they might be more able to catch them in the moment when they're unfolding, when they're about to use their dots, and they might make a different choice. Or if they can predict a moment in the future where they're tempted to use dots and they can bring to mind, oh, but when I do, in the long term, it goes like this, I'm going to try something different, we're building in more flexibility. So that ABC and connecting all the pieces is already going to give us some degree of traction to get some behavior change going. The next thing we want to do is we want to focus on values. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a wonderful area to work with young people on because it's right where they're at developmentally. So as I said, values are qualities from inside that really guide us. And there's a very common example in ACT. If you read any books and go to workshops, it's often mentioned, which is thinking about values like a compass. And if my compass says I'm going west, what are all the different places I could land if I go west? Okay, I'm in Toronto and I'll take the risk here because geography is probably my poorest subject. And I'm fused with that, by the way. If I go west, I can end up in Calgary, Winnipeg, not in that order, British Columbia. If I keep going west, I'm sure I could land up somehow in Asia, in Europe, in Australia. I can just keep going to different places if I keep going west. So going west is like the value. It's never going to get checked off of a to-do list and it's done. It's always going to guide my behavior when I bring it to mind and embody it. Where I'm going to go is the goal. And those can be checked off on the list. And that's important to differentiate. Okay, so, you want to get an A on a test. That's a goal. How do you want to show up to the studying? You want to be around people, you want to have friends, great. How do you want to show up to your friends? So this type of conversation can be helpful to just set the stage for what are values. Although I do like to ask people the going west or east or whichever direction you like and where they could end up, just to give them that idea from their own mind that you can keep going with values. They're never done. And values, when they're in the room, and it's an important lesson, is you'll see a change in your patient. When you're getting a lot of fusion and avoidance and rumination and worry, you might find that your patients don't look very enlivened. The story that they're telling, that self-as content, just feels repetitive, like they've said it 1,000 times. And even Emery was looking pretty bored telling it to me. Because there's just nothing, I think enlivening is the best word. There's nothing enlivening in all of that avoidance behavior. So when values are in the room, when we get people thinking and talking about what matters, you're going to start to see some changes in their nonverbal. Their eyes are going to twinkle. They might sit up a little bit straighter. They're going to look more enthused. There's more words coming out. And just the whole emotionality will change. So that's something for us to look for. So we can explain what values are to Emery, give them that difference between the going west and where we actually end up. And then we can really start to dig into what's important to Emery. Now, every once in a while, I will get a teen who comes in and like, nothing's important. I don't care. And they really are hooked in that. So the idea of two sides of the same coin can be very helpful for me as a therapist and for my clients. And it's this idea that what's on one side of the coin is our sense of who and what matters. And if I have something around, just like a cue card, I might get them to write that on one side. And on the other side, we're going to write, what are all the thoughts and feelings that show up when the who and what matters isn't going very well? So if what matters, and it sounds to Emery like what matters is getting good marks, going to university, having a career, being independent, when those goals are not feeling like they're going along as Emery would like, what are the thoughts and feelings that show up? And we've got the anxiety, the shame, the frustration, the anger, the sadness. So two sides of the same coin might suggest If Emery doesn't know about the who and what matters, but can identify those strong feelings, it's usually when things aren't going very well. We're flipping the cue card. It's okay. We're aware of all those strong thoughts and feelings, but what was on the other side that was evoking them? What's on the other side of the coin from those strong feelings? And if people still don't understand that part, I might ask, do you care if your socks match? Some people do, some don't, so feel free to adjust that question. But if I have a hunch someone's going to say no, I'll say, great. So if you turned up in session with me and your socks don't match, is that going to become a major focus of your attention? No. Great. Any strong feelings about it? Probably not. So, but you do have strong feelings about your terrible math teacher that makes it hard for you to learn and the awful friends that aren't treating you very well. So if you've got strong feelings, on the other side of the coin is who and what matters. So if Emery or the teens you're working with can't identify the who and what matters very easily, it can be really helpful to listen for those intense feelings and where all the frustration, anxiety, and sadness is. And it's just hiding there on the other side. And you may or may not explain that to your patients, but you can certainly be listening for it. So we start to get an idea, if Emery agrees, that yeah, friends in school are really super important to Emery, but they're not quite sure about this whole idea of how they want to show up. So if you, again, do any training or read about ACT, you can find lots of resources for different metaphors or experiential exercises to help you get more at values. And really what I'm doing in the early stages is just trying to help my teens and my patients identify some qualities, might be adjectives or adverbs that are values for them that they want to try on. And as we move into the therapy a little bit more, I'm trying to actually get them in touch with their values so they feel them. But for now, I just want to help them identify them. And again, there's lots of canned metaphors and exercises that you can try. And I think it's great when you're learning, so go for it. And it turns out after I've got to know Emery a little that they really like soccer. They love playing soccer. It's something that gets them sitting up a little bit more. So I can explain Emery values like this. Let's imagine you're on the soccer field and you and all the other players are wearing your team jersey. But instead of your name being on the back of that jersey, there's just a single word. And it's a word that describes how you want to show up on the soccer field for the game, for your team, and for yourself. What would be just one word that would describe how you want to show up on that soccer field? And chances are pretty good most people can come up with something. If they can't, I might give them a few words to choose from. Maybe just something like determined, attentively, again on you, the teen, and what's unfolding. But just that idea of working the idea into something that's already a part of their life or that they really like, where the idea is just if you could choose a quality that is how you show up, what would it be? And so I've just linked it to soccer. I'm remembering one other teen I worked with who had a real love of fashion and had a job in a clothing store. And we changed it up slightly. So it was the idea of if you're walking through the store and you're picking clothes up off the rack and you're looking at them and you're deciding whether or not you like them, you might put some back on the rack and you pick up another one. And we did all sorts of things with this. You could use it for diffusion. Like there's thoughts written on the clothes. Can you just hang them back up, leave them there, and go about your shopping? We also used it for values, because remember, this stuff all overlaps. So what would be the word on an article of clothing that you would want to take home with you because it means something to you? Or other ways to get at this might be asking teens to think of a person or a fictional character, someone alive or dead, that they admire. And I'd ask them to just really sink into what are the qualities of that person that they really admire and that they might want to try on for themselves. So if it's hard for the teen to really get in touch with values for themselves, they might be able to do it when we make it a little bit more distant. It's not so much about them. It's let's just try on something that's a quality in somebody else, which spontaneously I'm thinking for Emery, maybe it's a soccer player that he admires. how does that soccer player show up to the game? What does Emery notice and maybe want to embody or emulate? And maybe Emery could just try on that quality and bring it to their day. So that's really what we're talking about with values. And ultimately, the idea is we want Emery to approach friends, soccer games, even getting up in the morning and school from a place of values, as opposed to all the things that they're worried about, that they're ruminating about, that they're fused with. And when Emery acts on values, chances are that C column of the ABC will be quite different.